is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 24 of the So Free Art podcast, which is a little podcast I do each week about art and things. And this one is all about copying other artists' work. Not copying as in pretending it's yours, but copying as in studying their work and redrawing it to try and learn things. So that's what this week's podcast is going to be all about. It's probably only going to be a little one, but I thought it might be quite fun. And you can find show notes and stuff at sofreeart.com. But before we jump into the main topic, I got a new feature. Woohoo! It's a new feature called the Little Art Tip of the Week. And this week's Little Art Tip of the Week is to always carry a sketchbook with you. And this is something that right at the very start, I remember so many people saying it, and I kept reading it in all the books. Everyone kept saying, always make sure you got a sketchbook with you. And I think it's a bit like a photographer. If they've always got a camera with them, whenever they see something that catches their interest, they can quickly snap it. Well, the same is true of like having a sketchbook. So if you're out and about and you've got a sketchbook with you, if you see something that just you feel inspired to draw, you can quickly whip your sketchbook out and start sketching. And it's actually something that happened this week to me, which is where this little tip come from. Because I was sat on the bus going to work, and there was this girl sat on one of the chairs in this really, really cool pose. And what she was doing was she was like leaning over, but she had a mobile phone in one hand, and her other arm was like wrapped around her hand, and her legs were like, I can't really explain it, but it was a really interesting pose, and I don't think I would ever have been able to have drawn it. It's almost like I had to be seeing her to draw it. So as soon as I saw her, I just thought, I really want to draw you. I really want to draw that pose. So I quickly got my sketchbook out and sketched her, and then I actually turned that sketch of her into a little Sophie sketch. So it was quite fun how you could turn just a random person sitting in a nice pose. You could turn it into a more advanced sketch as well. The good thing about this art tip is you don't really have to do anything, because all you have to do is buy yourself a little sketchbook and a pencil or something, and just stick it in your bag and forget about it. And if you do that with all your bags, it means whenever you go out, you're always going to have a sketchbook with you. And the good thing is, it doesn't take much space. Like I said, you only need a little sketchbook. In my bag, I've got a little A6 sketchbook, which is tiny. I just put it in one of the side pockets, and I use a little case that you put glasses in, and I put a couple of pencils and an eraser in there with some refills and stuff. So I've always got my sketchbook and pencils with me. So that's this week's little art tip. It's to always carry a sketchbook with you. A very simple little tip. And that's that. So this week's topic is going to be about copying other artists' work, and why I think it's something we should all be doing, and it's just a really fun thing. That's the main thing, is that this is a really fun thing to do. So what I did in the week, I've got this magazine. It's an Imagine FX sketchbook magazine, and it's 180 pages of sketches from artists all around the world. And it's mainly fantasy art. So it's stuff like dragons, characters, there's little storyboards and everything. I really like this magazine. It's like a special edition that they put out every so often. It's £15, so it's quite expensive. But I think it's worth it, because there must be like hundreds or thousands of sketches in here. And if you really wanted, you could just work through each page, copying all the sketches, and you could probably do that for probably months, I think. So it's definitely worth it's definitely worth it as long as you like the sketches. That's one of the main things, is you got to be sketching something that you enjoy, because otherwise it won't be fun. And I think that's the main thing. We have to make sure what we're doing is fun. So what I did was, in the week I went through this magazine and I picked 3 sketches that really spoke to me, and I'll put images into the show notes so you can see the original sketch with my sketch next to it, just to show how even though you're copying other artists' work, somehow it still looks like your work. It's quite strange how it works. It's like you're copying their work, you're copying their drawing, but somehow you're making it your own. And it's really interesting. I like that. So you might like to look at the images. And the first one was a sketch of a little girl in a little white dress bending down on the grass, kneeling on the grass. And it was a sketch by the artist Miles Johnston. And the other one was a sketch of a lady with an umbrella walking through a crowded street, and that was by Rembert Montard. I'm not very good with these names. And the final one was a sketch called Scarlet and Fuchsia by Boris Vallejo and Julie Bell. And this one was it's a very sketchy sketch of a lady, or it's not, well, it is a lady, but it's more just like a gesture, really, of a female figure surrounded by like chaos of lines. It's a really interesting sketch. But what I noticed with all my sketches are that even though they do look like the original sketch, they also look different, and that's one of the things I really like, because even if you tried to replicate it, I feel like somehow it would still have parts of you in it, and it's a really fun thing. So I'm going to talk about this a bit in a moment, but with the first sketch, what I did was I noticed that I made her hair a lot more floaty. I also didn't put her facial features in, which is something I like doing, because I think when you don't draw the facial features, it makes it more about the body. It makes it more about the actual pose instead of just the face. But then I've also wondered if I'm doing that because I'm scared to draw faces. It might be. I think it might have started like that, but I don't really enjoy putting faces on characters. So, and what I also did with this one was I pushed her bum out a bit, so it just made her a bit more curvy. So, and this is something I've noticed with all of the 3 sketches, is that my sketches are a lot more sort of curvy and flowy, which I think that comes from my character Lil Sophie, and it's probably based on like the last couple of years of doing gesture drawings with all these floaty lines. I think that it now sort of goes into my work. So that's the sketches that I did, which sort of demonstrates some of the things I'm going to talk about. But there's like a few things I've sort of realised as to why I think copying other artists' work is really good. And the main thing, if there's only one thing, it's just that it's so much fun. Like doing that in the week, I think I spent 2 hours doing these 3 sketches, and I can't remember, the time flew by so quickly, because what I do is I put some music on, and of all the drawing exercises that I've done over the years, this one is probably the most fun and like completely relaxing, because you don't have to think at all. It's like you're not using your brain. You're just sort of drawing what you see, but like even though you're doing that, you're still somehow putting yourself into it. So, but it is a very relaxing, fun thing to do, and you learn so much. So I feel like I could do this forever. Like I could have kept going that day, but I had to stop. But so it's definitely one of my most favouriteest drawing exercises. because it's so much fun, but some of the reasons why I think it's good. So the first thing is that we learn by copying. So when you're copying another artist's work, you're actually going to be learning their like strokes, because each drawing is obviously made up of little pencil strokes and stuff. So as you're copying it, you, even if it's just subconsciously, you're like building up a database, I guess, of how that artist like put that sketch together, and that's all going inside your head, and in the end somehow it'll all come together to create your own sort of style, I guess. But not only that, but you'll notice patterns, so you'll start noticing things that you're drawn to, and sort of certain lines and styles that you're drawn to, which will, like I say, it will build up your database. So it's a good way of, I guess, finding who you are, really, by finding who these other artists are, which I feel that's quite cool. Another thing is that I don't think you really see something until you try to draw it, and that was something I noticed when I started doing portrait drawings, because, for instance, I would print out a picture of like a portrait that I thought this person, I really felt inspired to draw this person, but I thought I would have seen what they looked like, but it's only when I started drawing them that I realised I hadn't really looked at them before. So, like, for instance, you would start noticing, it could be as extreme as you'd notice a tattoo that you never noticed before, or maybe a little pimple, or lines, stuff like that, and it goes down to basic shapes. You start noticing shapes and stuff, but until you actually try to draw something, I don't think you really actually see what it is. So if you've got a piece of artwork that you really like the look of, the best way I think to study it is actually to draw it, because that's where you're going to actually really focus on each part of the drawing, and you'll start being able to work out what it is about that drawing that you like. So again, you're kind of building up your database. So I think it's a good way to study sketches and drawings and artwork from other artists that you admire. Another thing is that it's a fantastic way to get inspiration. So again, like kind of like what I was talking about earlier with the drawing that girl on the bus. For instance, one of these sketches I did of this girl bending down on the grass with her hair blowing in the wind, that is such an amazingly nice pose that I think in the future I will probably turn that into like a little Sophie pose or something. So like I look at that pose and I just think that's such a nice pose. It makes me want to do more sketches. So it's a good way of getting inspiration to come up with ideas for your future drawings, and it's also just a good way to get like motivation, because when I was doing these sketches in the week, when the time was up and I had to stop because I'd run out of time, I had to go to sleep or something, I just wanted to keep going. And it's like, I feel like this is a fun way to start your like drawing session. So if you had like 2 hours and you wanted to do some drawings but you didn't know what to do, I feel like a good thing to do would be copy another artist's sketch as like the first 5 to 10 minutes, just like a little warm-up thing, and then that will just inspire you and motivate you to keep going, and before you'll know it, you'll be off creating your own stuff. And that's another thing, is that a fun thing to do is to copy another artist's artwork but then start exaggerating it. So a bit like what Bert Dodson talked about in that book on last week's podcast, where he had I think it was 9 or 12 little thumbnails, and he drew a man pushing a boulder up a hill, and he kept, in each little square he kept changing it. So he had, 1 minute it was a little man pushing a big boulder, then it was a big man pushing a little boulder. He was like playing around with the idea of this man pushing a boulder. Well, you can kind of do that with other artists' work. So, say you were struggling to come up with a pose, you could copy someone's pose, and then you could just, say, create 4 little boxes next to it, and really start exaggerating the pose, and you'd start finding out, basically you're just playing around really and experimenting. But as I think it was Einstein said, the best form of something is play. I can't remember. He said something about how when you're playing, that's when you're sort of getting the most knowledge. So I think sketching other people's artwork is a fun way of playing and learning at the same time. So like I said, it is just an incredibly fun thing to do. And again, like I said earlier, how when I was copying the sketches, my own style was coming out of it. And that's another thing that's really fun, is that you'll find your own style by copying other artists' work. So I think if I was to sum it up, the main reason to copy other artists' work is that you'll find inspiration, you'll get incredible motivation. This is as long as you're copying sketches that you want to be copying. It's like if I was copying a bunch of action men, which doesn't really interest me, it probably wouldn't do this. Although saying that, the other day, where was it? I was sitting at the train station and I was sketching, and there was a post on the wall of, I think it was something to sign up to the army, and there was this army man. It was a silhouette of an army man holding a gun over his shoulder, and I just randomly started sketching it, and it's something I would never normally sketch. But what I did was I turned that into a little Sophie sketch, and I made it quite funny. So I guess in a weird way, maybe, and I've not really done this, maybe it would be quite fun to sketch a load of sketches that you're not really interested in, because maybe it would be quite interesting to see what you would do with that. I might try that. But I feel like the best way to do this is to be sketching people's work that you actually like, because you're going to be excited to do it, and because you like it, you kind of want to, well, when I'm sketching these sketches, I want to be as good as these artists. So I feel like if I'm copying their work, I'm at least somehow consuming some of their knowledge. And hopefully if you do that enough over the years, you'll find yourself. So I think the reason to do this is you're going to get like inspiration, motivation, you're building up your little database of what you enjoy doing and who you are, and also you're having sketches, which is always fun. It's always fun to have a sketchbook full of sketches. So for me, this is just like one of the most fun things to do. So I really wanted to talk about it on this week's podcast, and I hope you enjoyed it. If there's any little tips you've got or something, feel free, you can email me at sophie@sophielawson.com. You can find show notes at sophieart.com, and I'll put links and stuff to those images in the show notes. So all that's left to do is this week's inspirational quote, and it actually goes to Yohji Yamamoto, and it is, "Start copying what you love." See, this is what I say. I think you have to copy what you love. I think if you're copying action men, you might learn something, but I think if you would run the risk of just losing motivation. So anyway, I've spoiled the inspirational quote now. The inspirational quote is by Yohji Yamamoto, and it is, "Start copying what you love. Copy, 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 copy. At the end of the copy, you will find yourself." Yohji Yamamoto.